Good afternoon, people, and welcome back to the official topic talk. Hope you're all having a great, grand afternoon in this hot, lovely weather. Um, just something I wanted to bring to all your attention. I've just found it in the Sun newspaper this morning. Exposed: Britain's biggest child sex abuse scandal laid bare after 1,400 kids let down by cops. Shock report reveals. A police force has been blasted over Britain's biggest child sex abuse scandal, but not a single cop has been sacked over blunders that left kids in the clutches of ruthless grooming gangs. A report by policing watchdog into the Rotherham abuse scandal found officers failed to take decisive action even when a child was found in a bedroom with a suspected paedophile. Look at the state of these people. Just look at these photos, and you can just tell straight away that there's something not quite right with him. Especially look at the one in the bottom left-hand corner. Ashrid Basrat and Banaras Hussain, Cuban Ali, Karen McGregor, and Shelley Davis were jailed over the Rotherham sex abuse scandal. I mean, it just doesn't just include men. It also, as you can quite clearly see, it's females as well. Sammy Woodhouse was just 15 when she gave birth to Harshid Hussein's son after he repeatedly attacked her. She bravely waived her anonymity to help others. At least 1,400 girls suffered abuse in Rotherham due to the police failing in their duties. Kids aged 12 were deemed to have consented. Now, don't get me wrong, people, but isn't that why there's a law in this country to say that you have to be 16 to consent? It's law. Kids aged 12 were deemed to have consented. Now, how can any child consent to something that they don't really know? That's why the law's there to protect the children. It's a bit contradictory, this part, because kids aged 12 were deemed to have consented. Now, how can you possibly consent by law at the age of 12 when the law quite clearly states in this country that it's 16? Kids aged 12 were deemed to have consented to sexual acts, and victims were described by a detective sergeant as worldly wise, not meek and mild. The force was simply not equipped to deal with the wide-scale abuse of hundreds of vulnerable girls, the probe found. Yet the worst punishment meted out to police officers found to have committed misconduct were written warnings and words of advice. I'm sorry, but that's just not good enough. I mean, for a police force that's supposed to be protecting us in this country, and quite clearly they failed in their duties, blaming it on not having enough manpower. Even if there were more police officers on the streets, you know, their failings will still be high. They have a duty of care to the public. Quite clearly, they haven't been keeping up to what their job titles are meant to be as a police officer, and that's protecting our young children. How can a police officer accept that a 12-year-old has given consent when the law quite clearly states 16, which they should have withheld? An estimated 1,400 children aged between 11 and 16 were abused between 1997 and 2003. Among these was brave Sammy Woodhouse, I've read her book, who waived her anonymity to blow the whistle on the grooming gang and police failures. Sammy, who was just 15 when she gave birth to drug-dealing monster Arshid Hussein's son, still believes the system is letting victims down. That's true. I mean, because each and every day, these young children, you know, they're still going through it, even still today. And that's from 2003, and it's now 2022. The same things are still happening, and the police still are failing within their duties to protect our children. The new report by the Independent Office for Police Conduct has found officers were undertrained and some turned a blind eye. Police officers were found to have committed gross misconduct on 6 occasions, but only 2 went to disciplinary hearings. 3 of the officers had retired, and South Yorkshire Police were unable to identify the other. In some cases, officers were found to have simply breached professional standards and were given words of advice by their managers. The IOPC report found a catalogue of shocking failures by South Yorkshire police officers. Among the 43 proven blunders uncovered by the IOPC's Operation Linden were: cops failed to investigate an older man who was found undressed in a bedroom with one of the victims. In another, they didn't act when a perpetrator handed over a missing girl to them as part of a deal not to arrest him. Police did nothing after approaching a parked car with a victim and her sister were in, even though the abuser told them he had just had a sexual act performed on him by one of the girls. One girl's dad was told nothing could be done because of racial tensions surrounding the investigation. Police failed to safeguard a victim who was driven 180 miles to Bristol by 2 men. Now, these failings, they're just not acceptable. And as for the police force looking to be racists because of these incidents, quite frankly, isn't good enough. They have to still protect our young children. That's their job. That's what our society pays them for. There's been too much police corruption going on during these investigations and findings, and still not enough safeguards have been put in place to protect these young and vulnerable children. The police force need to take account. They need to change. One officer told the survivor's father that she might learnt her lesson after a suspected rape had happened. There was police inaction following concerns in 2008 a girl was being sexually exploited and had been raped. One young victim, who had been found after going missing, was taken to a police station, but instead of being cared for, she was locked in a small room. Victims were interviewed by the IOPC. One of them said, "No matter what bad experience I was going through, there was never any concern for me as a child. I don't recall a single time when the police treated me like I was a vulnerable child. Looking back, I now realise they had adult expectations from children, regardless of a child's age. I was age 13 and I was told more than a dozen times I was responsible for my behaviour, for being sexually abused and exploited by several grown men." Another simply said, "We was treated like we didn't matter." The IOPC said their investigation had been thorough. A spokesman for the organisation said the report includes findings and summaries from 91 investigations started between 2014 and 2018, the last of which was completed in 2020. They covered 265 separate allegations made by 51 complainants, 44 of whom were survivors of abuse and exploitation. During Operation Linden, we investigated the conduct of 47 officers. 8 were found to have a case to answer for misconduct, and 6 had a case to answer for gross misconduct. In many cases, officers had retired and, due to legislation in place at that time, could not face disciplinary proceedings. However, 5 of these officers received sanctions ranging from management action up to a final written warning. A 6th faced a misconduct hearing arranged by the force earlier this year, and the case was found not proven by the independent panel. Of the 164 allegations we looked into where an officer's conduct was not under investigation, we upheld 43 complaints. The police force have failed to protect our children. IOPC Director of Major Investigations Steve Noonan said South Yorkshire Police were simply not equipped to deal with the organised grooming and the abuse of vulnerable young girls. He said this has been an extremely complex and challenging piece of work, made more difficult by the fact some of these incidents took place more than 2 decades ago. However, we were determined to investigate thoroughly and leave no stone unturned. Policing has changed considerably, both nationally and in South Yorkshire, since the period we looked at, and a great deal of work has been done to address the issues of the past. Organisations across Rotherham and South Yorkshire have taken important steps to improve how they work together to protect children and young people. However, there is still more to do. Our report shows how South Yorkshire Police failed to protect vulnerable children and young people. Like other agencies in Rotherham at that time, it was simply not equipped to deal with the abuse and organised grooming of young girls on the scale we encountered. We are encouraging by the progress made to address the recommendations we made last year to ensure policing learns from this. The challenge now is to ensure that as this type of offending continues to evolve, police forces continue to adapt so they are never again caught unprepared. Rotherham Council have previously been lambasted for its part in failing to the victims. In January 2015, the Casey report concluded that the council had a bullying, sexist culture of covering up information and silencing whistleblowers and was not fit for purpose. In February 2015, the government replaced the council's elected officers with a team of 5 commissioners. A total of 19 men and 2 women were convicted in 2016 and 2017 of sexual offences in the town dating back to the late 1980s, with one of the ringleaders, Arshid Hussain, jailed for 35 years. But is that really compensation to these young vulnerable victims? Sammy Woodhouse was just 15 when she gave birth to Arshid's son after he reputedly abused her. Now that's just in Rotherham alone, and you can see how much police failings there have been. Not believing the young victims. I mean, it's shameful, and to think that these officers have played a part in enabling these abusers to continue their abuse. I think it's disgusting. I mean, but that is just Rotherham alone. I mean, Telford, they've got the highest rate for the child abuse scandal. I mean, I will be continuing with this, people. You know, there's a lot to cover on this. I mean, as you can see, that's just Rotherham. Hope you continue to have a good afternoon Wednesday in this warm weather.